Bin, I'm super excited to sit down with you and geek out over some generative AI and its applications in finance. It's undoubtedly the story of 2023. 2023 is the year of AI, but I'm most excited to discuss it at this point in time because I personally believe that the initial hype of ChatGPT and generative AI has passed. And now we can actually deep dive into the real use cases that are actually going to either boost productivity or generate alpha. I think ChatGPT 3, it was a fun tool that could write some Shakespeare poems and everyone was playing around with it. But now there's obviously real life applications that we as investors can actually use. But before we kick off, Bing, can you give a quick overview of your background, where you started, and some of your kind of career experiences so far?
Yeah, thank you, Eddie. Super excited to talk about the capital markets, the finance, and technology. So I am a computer scientist by heart. So I was trained as a computer scientist, really, fell into the finance industry by accident. So I have been working in finance in the front office as a trader, portfolio manager for over 15 years. And most recently at SigTech, I focus on building the state-of-the-art tools and technologies for, finance practitioners in finance, people just like me. So the team has been doing a great job, and the power of AI that was unleashed last year. We are starting to see the transformation that's happening in the industry.
Absolutely. And you're originally from China and you moved here to study. Can you talk about some of your experiences and what kind of projects you are working on?
Yes. So I came to Cambridge University, England in 2003, just over 20 years ago, to do my PhD. And I was lucky enough to be part of a team that worked on something called Xen, XEN spelled, which was the state-of-the-art hypervisor for virtual machines, our virtual machine monitor. So what it did was to allow people to divide physical servers into virtual servers. That was the beginning of the cloud computing, because in cloud computing, you should be able to essentially divide the resources of the server into multiple different parts and allocate them to your customers. So we built Xen, and it was open source. It was free. It was published on GitHub. And at the time, the only alternative was VMware, which was about 100 times slower and very expensive. So our project was eventually picked up by the team at Amazon, who started to build the AWS.
Wow.
So actually, the entire AWS cloud computing platform was built on what we did. So super lucky to work on something so important. And that certainly had a big impact on my career path afterwards.
Of course, while working on the code that essentially built AWS is a pretty big feat. And then you transitioned into finance and worked for probably one of the most famous hedge funds, Brevan Howard. Can you talk about some of your experiences there and obviously what shaped SigTech in the future and how you apply that computer science kind of experience at Brevan?
Thank you. So at Brevan Howard, which is one of the most successful hedge funds in history, I think the firm was started 20 years ago and has made over $30 billion of profits for investors in the last 20 years. Very successful. So Brevan Howard, I can say a lot about the firm, but I think the most amazing thing about the firm is part of the culture, which is an extremely high level of intellectual honesty. So the whole firm has this culture of constantly questioning, why we are making the decisions this way, how we are making money, and most importantly, why we are making money. As you know, Eddie, in finance, there's always a combination of luck and skills. So be able to tell when we are making money because we are lucky and when it's because we are actually, good at what we do can be quite difficult. So I think that part of the culture has a big fundamental, impact on me as a person. So at SigTech, the SigTech, the Sig, S-I-G, actually stands for a couple of things. One is the signal. So we are the technology for, finding signals. And also SIG stands for Systematic Investment Group, which was the name of my team at Brevan Howard. So we built the entire infrastructure from scratch, really, to manage several quant funds. And in 2019, when Alan Howard, the founder of Brevan Howard, and I sat down to discuss, we decided to focus on the technology because, again, through, being intellectually honest, we felt that we had really very strong edge in the tech we developed. So that's the inception of SigTech. So we started as a spin-off from Brevan Howard in February 2019.
It's fascinating. Can you just break down for the audience, because many of the people that will eventually watch this will be, average people, looking to invest and trade. What does systematic trading actually mean? Like, what kind of things were you working on?
I think systematic trading fundamentally depends on a, quote, systematic investment process, which means the major investment decisions are made based on rules rather than human intuitions and feelings. Right? The reason that's important is because investing can be a highly emotional experience, and humans don't necessarily make the best decisions when we become emotional. So to be able to articulate and systematize how we make investment decisions allows us to stay rational and make better decisions. So I think that's ultimately the foundation of systematic trading or systematic investing. Is about being methodical, systematic, rule-based, less emotions, and more rigor.
Absolutely. And so you spun SigTech essentially out of Brevan Howard. Can you just explain what SigTech actually does? Who are the clients? Because it's almost separate to the actual ChatGPT plugin that we'll discuss later. It's a very different client base. Can you just talk to who your clients are and what you do for them?
So SigTech, we are a fintech company specializing in capital markets. Because when people talk about fintech, there are many types of firms, like payment companies and insurance tech, but we specialize in capital markets. So our clients are almost exclusively advanced investors and traders in the front office on the buy side. And by buy side, we mean hedge funds, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, basically any institutional investors. We provide infrastructure and technology that cater to the extremely demanding investment process of these users.
That investment process, can you just explain SigTech's kind of use case? Because from idea generation to actual execution can be a very long process, right? How does SigTech kind of fit into that?
So maybe let me kind of describe a typical day of a portfolio manager on the buying side, what they do every day. So I think the origin of an investment decision ultimately come down to some sort of a information input, right? It could be a news story, it could be a piece of insight. So there's always a big part of the investment process is about access to new data, right? Access to new data. So, but there are so much data in the world today, and there are so many choices. So a big part of the job is actually to, requires a team really to just sift through all the possible data sets available and understand which ones are relevant to what the market you invest in, and which ones are better and helpful really compared to what you already have. So that's a big part of it, how to select data sets to access. And then once you have that access, there's a arduous process of, distilling the data into signals, because all data sets come with, a lot of noise. The signal to noise ratio can vary significantly among different data sets. So the process of processing the raw data, finding the signals is part of the core stages of the investment process. Once you have the trading signals, then you have to turn them into exposures to different asset classes. Now here is where the highly intellectual kind of a stage where there are two sorts of problems, really. There are two related problems. One is a prediction problem. It's like, can you use the signal to predict how the assets will return? If you think about, I say the simple question of tomorrow when will the S&P 500 go up or down? Now, we all know that markets are largely efficient and they tend to be a random walk. So the odds of S&P going up or down tomorrow is about 50-50. So the prediction problem says, can you actually predict with better than 50% accuracy? It could be 51%, 52%. So that extra 1 or 2% is your edge. So it's a prediction problem. But then there's the second problem, which is sometimes people overlook, which is the payoff problem. Because when people use linear instruments to express your investment, the upside and downside tends to be symmetrical. So if I'm just using S&P, say ETF or futures to bet on the returns of S&P tomorrow, then if I'm right, I may make, say, 1%. If I'm wrong, I lose 1%. It's a symmetrical payoff. But sometimes one can use asymmetric instruments, nonlinear instruments, or so-called instruments that offer convexity options. And the options give investors asymmetric payoff. So I make more money when I'm right, and I lose a lot less when I'm wrong. So that actually changes how prediction is done as well, because it gives you more room to make the right predictions. So after that, then there's the more of an operational stage of translating your exposures to assets into trading orders to get them executed. So as you can see, the whole process is extremely convoluted. It involves multiple different teams. There are operational aspects. There are intellectual / analytical aspects. There are commercial aspects of how to get access to data, how to pay for them. So at SigTech, we aim to take care of as many of these steps as possible so that the users can only focus on what they really want to do, which is come up with the right ideas and make returns for investors.
Absolutely fascinating. What are hedge funds, your clients for SigTech on the kind of quant side? What are they using artificial intelligence and machine learning really to do? You alluded to it a little bit there, but AI and ML have been around for decades, but it's now this new generation of generative AI that is catching the headlines, and it's kind of almost a new beast. Can you just talk to what these hedge funds are using AI and ML to do?
I think being a computer scientist myself gave me some longer-term view of how the industry has developed over the last 20 years. I think on the AI side, the truth is the AI has been a very topical, topical research area for a long time. And there has been multiple so-called AI winters. There was a resurgence of interest in AI in about 15 years ago when the deep learning was showing to outperform, handcrafted prediction models. And I think that mainly started from the image recognition, and then later on, also into voice recognition. I think at that time, before the generative AI, I think hedge funds were mainly thinking about how to use machine learning for prediction problems. Basically, can we build better prediction models using AI? The issue with AI and machine learning model in prediction is that it's by construction entirely data-driven. There's no explicit differentiation between correlation and causation, which is fundamentally very important to making investment. So the issue is applying machine learning model to finance there are twofold. One, there is actually a lack of data because when you think about images, you have billions of pictures of dogs and cats, and that you can use to train the AI models. But in finance, if you're looking at just daily time series, there are only 252 data points a year, right? There are only 2,500 for a decade. So that the sparsity of the financial time series data make it quite difficult to train AI models. The other thing is, once you get AI models to make predictions, it's hard to tell why, because the neural networks is quite opaque, and there's no good way to interpret why the output is what it is, right? So it's quite difficult for the humans to interrogate the model and understand the reason for making these predictions. I think those two explained why the machine learning was not really successful in hedge funds until now, because now we have generative AI, which is a totally different.
So how does generative AI play into this? And obviously it's a benefit and a more of a problem, because then there's almost infinite data more to be analyzed. And systematic investors obviously focus on generating that alpha by maintaining almost an information advantage, right? It's that asymmetry of, that's their edge. So how does generative AI and more data impact them and, let's say, the world of finance?
One distinction I want to make is previously the machine learning models were used to analyze time series. It was a time series prediction problem, and it was not really very successful due to the sparsity of the data, and there are some fundamental design choices of neural networks which made it less effective at time series. But generative AI is different because it's actually trained entirely on more or less textual data, right? Fundamentally, the generative AI does one thing, which is given a context, a string of words, what would be the most likely next word, right? So what would be the most likely word next, right? It's all about predicting the next word, or so-called next token. And then the generative AI, that's all it does, right? And which is a very beautiful thing because it's so generic and can be applied in many different ways. So what generative AI brings to finance is that it's not so much on time series analysis. Actually, the generative AI is really bad at math. Actually, math is like the worst areas generative AI is performing. But it's amazing at analyzing unstructured textual data. So this means a lot of this unstructured data that we consume every day as a human analyst, such as news feeds, such as Twitter feeds, such as images, such as voice, for example, like podcasts or like speeches given by the central bankers. All those suddenly can be analyzed by the generative AI models, and you can then reason about it. I think the key thing here is generative AI models is trained on unstructured data and is a fantastic reasoning engine. And that is proving to be something quite dramatic.
And having spent time with you, I know all of this stuff gets you really, really excited, just like it does me. I just want to dive deep into, what did OpenAI do so well? Why was it so game-changing? Because people have been working on this, like you mentioned, for the last 15 years. What did they do that was so different and innovative?
OpenAI as a firm is a overnight success, 10 years in the making. The firm was started 10 years ago. And frankly, we didn't really I think very few people paid attention to their product until literally 1 year ago, right? So I think what's extraordinary about OpenAI is that they managed to raise a huge amount of capital to pursue a frankly seemingly impossible goal, which is AGI, right? Artificial General Intelligence. And then they spent 10 years getting the best talent in the field to work toward that goal. And then if you think about what happened last year, the ChatGPT was released just about a year ago. The truth is it was released with the GPT-3 model, which is impressive, but certainly a lot worse than the GPT-4. But on the other hand, the GPT-3 model was available as an API service many months before the ChatGPT was made available. So I think the very interesting thing here is, for like half a year, like anyone in the world could have built a chat application, front end, calling the GPT-3 API service hosted by OpenAI, and essentially create the ChatGPT before OpenAI did it themselves. But somehow it never took off. But only when OpenAI released ChatGPT, when people suddenly realized the power of these models. I think this reminds me a typical situation where any disruptive technologies has to be combined with some kind of a disruptive user experience and user interface to really go viral, right? Because at the end of the day, a user doesn't really care so much about the complexity of the technology behind it. They care about the novel user experience that they get from using it. I think the ChatGPT, and then based on the user feedback, they dramatically improved their models. So we had 3.5 Turbo, then we have GPT-4, which is, in my mind, probably about 10 times better than GPT-3. I think that's when everybody realized, oh my God, this is no longer sci-fi film. It's actually real.
Absolutely, and all the good things, on one side, but it did have quite severe limitations, particularly in GPT-3, that has raised all kinds of concerns, if it's privacy, security, hallucinations being one of the biggest ones. Can you just talk to your initial reaction when you saw all of those things? Writing a Shakespeare poem, or helping someone mark their homework and write a social media post is one thing. But when we're playing in the field of finance, where mistakes can't happen, what is the limitation of those potential hallucinations? And I'm speaking specifically about OpenAI. Let's say if you were to ask it general finance questions.
I think when I started using the GPT-3, it felt like a 13-year-old intern. It has good reasoning capabilities. It understood a lot of domains, but there was clear gap between, what it was offering and what we expect a competent average human can do. GPT-4 to me it feels like a second-year analyst, working in a company. And amazingly, I think GPT-4 was able to pass almost all the university entrance exams and some professional exams as well. I think GPT-4 was able to pass the New York State bar exam in the top 10%, right? So suddenly you have access to this, let's say, second-year associate who can be a lawyer, an accountant, a poet, and a novelist, and also can help you write your homework. And then all you need to do is to pay $20 a month. And that's transformational. But the limitation of GPT-4, or actually any large language models, is actually about numbers. I can see some irony in this. They are really bad at math. But it's not surprising, because if you think about us, think about ourselves, we know the concepts in arithmetics. Now we know about how to do multiplication, what's square root. We know these concepts. We learn them in school, and GPT-4 understands those concepts. But none of us, humans or large language models, can do advanced calculation without using a calculator. Now, if I ask a person, what's the square root of 355, it's unlikely he will work it out in his mind. So that's why we need tools. I think in my mind, in the last 12 months, the world was changed by the introduction of these large language models. Think of them as reasoning engines. They have amazing reasoning engine. There are amazing reasoning capabilities across large number of domains. But in parallel, I see the emergence of a new industry, which is to provide the tools to these AI models. Just like the entire human society produces tools for ourselves, right? So to augment the AI models, especially in different domains, and in SigTech, in addition to serving our customers, a big focus of the firm is to design and build, sometimes from first principles, the best tools and make them available to large language models.
Perfect. So that transitions nicely into what you've built essentially on top of it. You brought me in a couple of months ago. I saw it live in action, and I'm very active in this space, checking out generative AI's applications in finance. And I tried a few tools, and they were, again, subpar, obviously with ChatGPT being more generalist, again, bad at maths, hallucinations. And I saw the SigTech plugin, and I was blown away. I saw it live, and I saw really the sophistication of it. It wasn't just pulling S&P data or fundamental income statement, balance sheet, cash flow, that type of thing that I've seen, other tools. It was producing, strategies, analyzing portfolios, using concepts like Sharps and Sortino ratios that I didn't expect it to be able to do. So when you saw that OpenAI, ChatGPT, and obviously some other, kind of competitors, let's say, in the space, what did you see as the opportunity? Because obviously you saw it, you used that 13-year-old kind of intern, you were messing around with the models. Clearly a spark went off, right, in your head, and you thought, wow, using our data and what we've kind of used and curated from our institutional clients, you saw an opportunity to make this accessible to all. So I guess my question is, what is the motivation behind that? Obviously, there's a financial opportunity, but also having dealt with all these hedge funds and the kind of motivations behind the SigTech plugin, there's clearly a motivation to make quant trading and some of the more sophisticated analytics available to all. So can you speak to that kind of internal motivation?
Yeah, I think our mission as SigTech is to get more and more people to participate in the financial capital markets and make better decisions. And to do that, we have to, give them the best tools. And by people, we don't just mean not just average people, but also just a lot of the finance practitioners. They also need better tools to make better decisions. So if you think about, systematic trading, systematic investment, ultimately there are three major barriers. The first barrier is the access to the right data. The second is analytics tools. And the third is a knowledge of the financial market, just in general. So these are the three barriers. Today, by using AI, what we are doing is we are essentially making all the tools and data sets up until now only available to the most advanced users who have decades of experience managing billions and billions of assets. We're making them available to large language models so that everyone, by having a conversation in English, can use the tools indirectly, but also effectively, and start making decisions. I think what really gets us excited is this new paradigm where everyone can use the tools without writing a line of code. Anyone can do data analysis without really, actually have to do it themselves. If I think about the nature of the work, I think it's changing because as a knowledge worker, up until now, we are paid to provide solutions, right? That's what we do. We come to work, we use a bunch of tools, we do a lot of thinking, and then we provide solutions. But when AI with the right tools can provide the good solutions, the nature of our job as humans is changing into asking the right questions.
There's quite a few key points that I want to drill down into, but there's one point that I think is so important, but almost understated and almost forgotten or pushed to the side. Having worked at S&P myself, using the Capital IQ, let's say data set, for example, and, dealing with institutional clients there, I know that data is extremely valuable, but also extremely expensive, right? If it's credit ratings, fundamental data, income statement, balance sheet, cash flows, etc., credit analytics. This can cost institutional investors tens, hundreds, if not millions, pounds or dollars, euros, whatever you want to call it. So yes, there's the kind of the solutions element, but how useful is the curation of that really high-powered, cleaned, kind of mapped data to the average person in one place?
I think first, the data vendors charge a very high prices for their data sets. It's because maybe up until now, they can only sell to a limited set of users, right? So when you sell to this limited set of users, you just, from a commercial point of view, you really charge as much as you can, right? If there's a new technology like the ones we develop at SigTech, we can expand the addressable market for all these data vendors. Not just increasing it by 100x. We're talking about maybe 1,000x, maybe 1,000,000x. Then suddenly, the price point will naturally come down. I think that's a very important point I want to make. I think the other thing is, up until now, the data sets reside in silos, right? The data set curated by S&P Capital IQ, which is very well known and widely used in the industry. The data does not talk to the data, sitting in, Refinitiv or different exchanges. So there is this arduous process of actually mapping the data across their silos to make sure they can be mapped and talk to each other. That's an exercise. But up until now, each institutional investor, they have to do this mapping, cleaning, validation process themselves. It's like, it's like everybody reinventing the wheel, everybody solving exactly the same problem again and again, all by themselves. There's a high degree of inefficiency in this. So one thing we offer at SigTech is to do it once and for all. We do it once and all our users can just enjoy the outcome. Don't have to, repeat the same process. That gave us advantage in terms of the scale of the business and also the time to market. So that users can focus on getting signals and making decisions using the data instead of mapping the data itself.
Absolutely. So spending more of that valuable human time, energy, effort on the things that are actually going to generate alpha rather than that investment process, cleaning the data and things like that. So let's get on to the applications. We kind of just talked about the quality of the input, and whatever you put in, you tend to get out. What are the main applications that you see for institutions and let's say finance practitioners and everyday people in terms of using the SigTech plugin as an example? Because we've seen many bigger institutions now working on some of these use cases. So as an example, Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, basically mapping all of their kind of client documents and research. So when those financial advisors speak to their clients, they've almost got the chief economist in their pocket and they can kind of ask that question. But there's so many applications available. If it's wealth management, financial tax planning, let's say the automation of some of the valuation modeling in private equity and investment banking and investing, risk management. So what do you think the short to medium to long-term applications of the plugin are, and who's going to be using this and what for?
Let me start by explaining a bit about what the plugin is. The plugin is just a fancy word for tools. I think it's quite important to understand that large language models are fundamentally trained on predicting the next token, right? So being able to use tools is one of the emergent capabilities of large language models. Some are good at it, but a lot of the models actually are not very good at it. So this whole research domain focusing on how large language models can use tools. And I want to just kind of dig deeper into this to explain why it's actually quite difficult. Just think about it. Let's say I ask a question, and large language model first has to realize it cannot give me a good answer using its pure, built-in reasoning capabilities. It has to resort to external tools. So that's step number one. And then let's say we make 100 different tools available to the large language model. Then the large language model has to go through this phase of tool selection. It has to understand which tools among these 100 available to me I should pick to try to use to generate the right answers. Now, the complexity of picking the right tools out of 100 is actually incredible. It's combinatorial, right? So it's a very, very big number. So to make the right choices, it's not trivial. But once you have picked the right tools, then you have to decide, okay, do I use, it's very rare for one tool to produce the answer in entirety. So quite often the large language model has to use different tools in a certain sequence. Sometimes the output of the first tool may be the input to the second one. So how to chain those two together to get to the right answer is, again, a difficult problem. So at SigTech, we focus on providing the tools, not just the right tools, but also solving the problems like tool selection, tool coordination, how to chain them together. It's a very active research areas. So in terms of the applications of the large language models augmented by tools in finance, I think immediately we can see application in wealth management. For example, currently to have a dedicated investment advisor requires a pretty high bar in terms of how much capital you put to use, and be able to get sound, rational, logical, good advice, literally 24/7 at your fingertip, can be a huge game changer for the wealth management industry. Think about wealth management for everyone. And then a lot of the average investors or retail investors tend to have a barbell strategy, which I think is correct. The barbell strategy means they invest a bulk of their wealth in rather conservative but well-diversified portfolios, such as equities, bonds, gold, some commodities, maybe even cryptos, but then allocate maybe 10% of their capitals to something more, let's say, more dramatic, more exciting. It could be trading option strategies, could be trading, highly volatile tech stocks, could be trading meme stocks, and that requires a lot more data and analysis, and just in general, much faster reaction time. And the large language models with the right tools can help them make those decisions and make the trading not only potentially more profitable, but also more fun. Longer term, I think with the AI, the nature of the job in finance will be changed. A lot of the good practice, labor intensive, but lower value work, not only will be automated, but will be made available to a much larger audience. So humans' job could be morphed into helping the AI models to get better, to help train AI models to get better, and then having more time to focus on the higher value add. Because at the end of the day, humans are creative. Wherever we have the extra time and energy, we can always find something interesting and exciting to work on.
Absolutely. So more of a macro question, but with all these AI co-pilots making our time more efficient, allowing us to spend more time doing the more valuable work, will this lead to a productivity gain that the global economy really, I would say, needs right now? How do you see it impacting the wider macro in terms of job replacements, in the sense of augmenting the tasks that we do?
I think AI will lead to dramatic increase in labor productivity. And also the competitive nature of industries adopting AI means once one company or one firm or even one person starts to become very productive, a lot more productive with the help of AI tools. And it forces all their competitors, to step up and follow suit. So in the near future, I think the productivity gain may start with a few pioneers, but will considerably spread to the rest of the industry in a possibly very short period of time.
Most people will be familiar, let's say, with the chat interface and ChatGPT, but could you talk to some of the features and the tools that the SigTech plugin can actually provide that goes beyond the kind of basic, where is the S&P trading today? Can you get me the income statement of this company? Can you explain some of the, let's say, more basic features that SigTech can do but ChatGPT can't? And then some of the really advanced, sophisticated kind of either tools, strategies that you've basically extracted from your work with institutions and are now almost giving to retail?
So I think in the investment process, there are three layers of concepts. One is the instruments, financial instruments, how they work. The second is strategies. What's your investment strategy? And then the third one is portfolios. That's when you put different strategies together into one well-diversified basket. So at the instrument level, what people need is about, how they work, and what's the price, what's the volume, but also for the derivatives, it's the valuation of those derivatives. So SigTech, we have the right data sets, the right analytical tools. We have made them available to large language models. So when a user asks about, say, a certain option or certain futures, trading at what levels, not only do you get the numbers back, you actually get to see how that returns, performed in a certain period. You can see the key performance metrics. You can see the large language models actually also give you certain observations just to help you to digest the information you receive back. So at the instrument level, it helps a user to understand, what's a future, what's an option, what's an ETF, and how that instrument performs over time, and all the intricate data around it. And then the next level is strategies, right? When we talk about investment strategies, there are so many different types. So at SigTech, we have developed a library of template strategies that encapsulates all the major styles of investment, like a professional does to date. So for example, people may be familiar with trend following strategy, like mean reverting strategies, or strategies simple as 60-40, long only, or it could be long short, could be long some your favorite tech stocks and short the benchmark to reduce the systemic risks. Then there are also option strategies. So I think by having this library and make it available to the large language models, and then a user can only ask the right question in English, and then essentially build those strategies on demand, is really useful. And then once you have strategies, then there's a question of how do you put different strategies into portfolios. The key here is to understand the correlations between strategies, how to understand how to construct a balanced and diversified portfolio out of the different strategies which give you different exposure to different risks. So, this is where the risk management and investment management, kind of merge. With the right tools and the reasoning capability of the large language models, I think suddenly everybody can, create a portfolio that caters to your own personal preferences. For example, for people who work in Silicon Valley, let's say you work for Google, you probably don't want to have a portfolio of that's just long Nasdaq 100 index. Why? Because you are also sitting on a large pile of Google stock options. If anything, you're already overweight Google's. So actually the right Nasdaq for you, Eddie, in this scenario, is Nasdaq minus some Google exposure to take into account your personal personal financial circumstances. So this used to be seemingly simple, but used to be extremely expensive to customize. But today, for the first time, it becomes totally achievable.
Absolutely, it's such a key point. I think on the sophisticated institutional side, of course, you're assessing your correlations, and if you've got a multi-asset class portfolio, you're constantly assessing, the correlations, the signals that are coming from that. But from a retail perspective, you may have some equity options. Let's say if you work for Google, but you may be long NASDAQ, S&P, very familiar products, maybe some Tesla, maybe then trading options. And actually what you're doing is you're just making a big interest rate bet and you don't realize it, but you're just doing it. And we've obviously saw that with the retail boom that happened during the pandemic. So how valuable is that assessment of that kind of portfolio construction? Because there's the trading side and then there's the portfolio construction side. And if you can basically ask your own portfolio for, how correlated is my portfolio to interest rates, or how much is my exposure in tech, looking across all the different assets and ETFs, how valuable is that?
That's incredibly valuable. And essentially, everyone now at their disposal, an intellectual partner that can help you interrogate, your own investment portfolios. For example, you can ask large language models to look at your existing positions and ask you tough questions. It can ask you, are you sure that you want to triple your exposure to Google? Because essentially there are 3 strategies that all have the same exposure. Or it can ask you, or you can ask the large language models, a portfolio like this, what are the major risk factors? And how will it perform in a highly elevated, in a high interest rate and high inflation environment? All these kind of seemingly basic scenario analysis, and just ask those questions, I think provide people with insight they probably didn't think about before.
So some of the stuff we've discussed is maybe a little simple, let's say, but very common amongst, let's say, retail investors. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum. How advanced can this get? Can I create baskets of, different products? What's the extent to how much I can push this plugin?
Yeah, the plugin currently provides about 20% of the functionalities we provide to human users. But by the end of March or April next year, we expect that percentage to go up to 90%. By that time, a user can build a basket. Basically, you can compose as many times as you want. You can have you can long S&P 500 benchmark, and then you can overlay some kind of a long-short equity strategy to provide some extra kicker or alpha on top of it. And then you can put it together a fixed income strategy that, invest in not just US, but maybe European and emerging market government bond markets. And then you can just do a little bit of, some diversification, to invest into like commodities, either via ETFs or via futures, and maybe even some crypto exposure. The way we design the tools, if we think about the right user experience, allows users to really compose different functionalities. It's very flexible. It's very expressive. I think that's one of the key considerations when we build a product like that today, because it's a whole new user experience. Now, I want to give a couple of examples. For example, people are used to the fact that all software has bugs. So when we run a piece of computer program and we encounter an error, our first intuition is to try it again. And if we see the same error, then we know it's a bug. Unless the bug has been fixed, there's nothing we can do. But when it comes to large language models, we ask a question. It may give a kind of an incorrect answer. actually, it's mainly because the question we asked is unclear. We didn't provide enough context. We made certain assumptions. And so once we clarify that, we try again, the large language models will most likely give you a much better answer, maybe even the correct answer. But that requires a user to realize that you are really interacting with the computer program. That's no longer purely deterministic, but actually you can morph. You can customize and tweak its behaviors, in real time. I think that's a new user experience. But once people get it, they will become, used to it very, very quickly. The other example I want to give is that what you mentioned before, like at the end of the day, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? And so the AI has the tools, AI has the reasoning capabilities, but the onus is on us to ask good questions. So I really believe that in the future, the essence of the knowledge worker becomes who can ask the good questions. If you ask a good question, you get a good answer. If you ask a better question, you get a better answer. If you ask the best question, you get the best answer. So maybe, the ancient Greeks that spent their entire time, debating and doing philosophy. Maybe they had a point.
So it's come full circle then. We're back to philosophy. So looking to the future, what does the roadmap for the plugin look like in 1 year's time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time? What would you hope to achieve with this?
First, I think we are, by focusing on providing the best tools, not just to human users, but also large language models. I think SigTech, we are in a very good position in a sense that we do enjoy any progress or improvement made to those AI models. So every week we come to work and we realize someone somewhere, such as OpenAI, has done something to the models and it's better. And that automatically elevates our product and provides a better user experience. But on our side, our job is to make more data sets available through to the AI models, and therefore, make them available to a much larger audience, but also make more analytical tools available. Could be, option pricing, could be, risk management, more advanced portfolio management, and later on execution capabilities, all built into the AI models and available to pretty much everybody. I honestly think by the end of next year, interfacing with AI models will become the default for both professionals and retail investors alike. And only then, and we only need to touch writing the code and do some of the laborious steps ourselves, if necessary. But most of the time, we'll simply be satisfied by letting AI do the job for us.
Absolutely, it's fascinating. It's the exponential nature of it, right? So as we wrap this up, Ben, it's been a real pleasure picking your brains on everything, Gen AI and the SigTech plugin. Where can people go to find out more, but also try it for themselves?
So currently the plugin is free and available to everyone. So you can either go to our website, SigTech.com, and you can follow the links, and there's a tutorial on how to install it and how to use it. And there are example prompts you can use to answer some of the most commonly asked questions about financial markets. Or if you are already a subscriber to OpenAI ChatGPT, you can go to the plugin store, search SigTech, and install the plugin immediately and start using it. I hope we are improving it every day based on the user feedback, and we look forward to having more users.
Brilliant. And so thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Eddie. Pleasure.